What happens when Hollywood royalty walks into the lion's den of daytime television? When Meghan Markle took her seat at The View, no one expected a routine interview. What unfolded was one of the most explosive, unfiltered confrontations ever seen on daytime TV. This wasn't just a sit-down chat. This was a verbal war zone, where the niceties disappeared within minutes and the gloves came off completely. From the second Meghan stepped onto the set, the atmosphere was electric. Something was different. The applause was polite but muted, the audience sensing the tension before a word was spoken. Meghan, dressed impeccably in a cream blazer, wore her signature poised smile, but beneath it was a flicker of unease, a guardedness that even casual viewers could detect. At the center of it all, WhoopiGoldberg.com and commanding. To her side, Joy Behar, with that unmistakable glint that always signals trouble. Sunny Hostin and Sarah N. completed the panel, both armed with notes, questions, and an unmistakable air of preparedness. This was no promo stop. This was an interrogation. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi began, her tone serious. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and we've got questions America's been waiting to hear answered." The first blow came quickly. Joy Behar didn't hesitate. "Meghan, you've made serious allegations about the royal family, but a lot of people are asking, where's the proof? You say you were a victim, but some say you knew exactly what you were signing up for when you married into the monarchy." Meghan kept her cool, but her grip on her coffee mug subtly tightened. "I think that's a very unfair characterization," she replied. "I've never claimed to be a victim. I've simply told the truth about my experience navigating a complex institution." Sunny Hostin leaned in. "Your truth," she pressed. "But the palace has released statements that directly contradict your claims. Former staff have come forward with very different accounts. How do you explain that discrepancy?" Meghan's jaw tightened, though her voice remained steady. "It's fascinating how quickly people accept the palace's word when it suits them. Yet when I speak about my lived experience, suddenly credibility is questioned. Where was all this scrutiny when I was being attacked by the British press?" Sarah Haynes entered the fray with surgical precision. "But that's the point," she said. "Some critics argue your story keeps changing. First, it was media treatment, then racism, then being silenced. So which is it? And why should people believe this version over the others?" The panel worked like a machine, each question sharper than the last, pushing Meghan into a corner. Her years of media training were on full display, but even she couldn't fully hide the pressure building beneath the surface. "These aren't separate issues," she shot back, her voice firmer now. "They're connected. The media's treatment of me was shaped by racial bias. The palace prioritized its image over my well-being. And yes, I was silenced when I tried to raise concerns through the proper channels." Whoopi leaned back, eyeing her carefully. "But here's what's hard for some to reconcile. You had access to support. Most people don't. A prince, lawyers, PR teams, and still, you say you were powerless." Meghan's composure finally cracked. The anger surfaced. "So because I had resources, I'm not allowed to speak out. Because I married into privilege, I should accept injustice. That's exactly the kind of mindset that keeps people silent." But Joy wasn't done. She moved in for the kill. "Some people see it differently. They think you want to have your cake and eat it too." And with that, the studio fell into stunned silence. No scripted sound bites. No rehearsed laughter. Just raw, live tension beamed into millions of homes. This wasn't just a talk show segment, it was a cultural flashpoint. And Meghan Markle. She had just walked through fire on The View. You wanted the royal titles, the prestige, the global platform, Joy Behar said, her tone cool and unflinching. But when it came with responsibilities and constraints you didn't like, you walked away, yet you kept the benefits. Can you understand why that might rub people the wrong way? The accusation hit like a hammer. For the first time in the interview, Meghan Markle visibly faltered. Her confident exterior slipped, her hands fidgeted in her lap, and the practiced smile vanished from her face. "That is such a reductive, frankly, insulting way to look at the situation," she said, her voice sharper now. "Suggesting I should have remained in a space that was damaging to my mental health just to meet public expectations." But the panel wasn't easing up. This was The View in its most unrelenting form for seasoned hosts who'd made their names asking what others wouldn't dare. They saw the cracks forming and leaned in harder. Each question became a scalpel, cutting deeper. Even when the camera stopped for commercial, the atmosphere remained charged. Meghan sat stiffly in her chair, no longer bothering with public relations polish. Meanwhile, the hosts huddled like strategists before a second round, their energy feeding off the growing tension. What no one realized was that they were only just scratching the surface. When the show returned, the tone had completely shifted. This wasn't a celebrity interview anymore. This was an inquisition. "Welcome back," Whoopi said, her voice low and deliberate. "We're continuing our conversation with Meghan Markle, necessary conversation about accountability and truth-telling." The word truth-telling landed like a loaded weapon. Meghan's eyes flashed. Joy didn't miss a beat. "Meghan, you seemed upset during the break, but let me ask you directly. If you're making a career out of telling your story in public, don't you think you should be ready to defend that story when there are legitimate questions about inconsistencies?" "Inconsistencies?" Meghan's voice rose slightly, the calm cracking. "I've been completely consistent about my experience. Just because my truth doesn't fit someone else's preferred narrative doesn't make it false." Sunny Hostin leaned forward, her courtroom instincts fully activated. "Let's get specific. In your Oprah interview, you said you were suicidal and received no support from the royal institution. But palace sources and we've confirmed this say you were offered multiple resources, including counseling, which you declined. How do you explain that contradiction?" The studio went silent. Meghan's face flushed, and for a moment she struggled for words. "Those palace sources weren't living my life," she snapped. "The so-called help came with conditions restrictions that would have worsened my situation, not improved it." "What conditions?" Sarah Haynes interjected quickly, because from the outside it sounds like genuine support was offered, and you rejected it only to later claim you were abandoned. That's a major accusation if it's not the full story. The tension in the room was electric. Meghan shifted in her seat, her fingers clenching and unclenching in frustration. "Twisting my words," she shot back. "This is exactly what I mean when I talk about being attacked for speaking out. I came here for a conversation, not an interrogation." "But you are on trial, in a way," Whoopi said bluntly, leaning forward. "You've made serious accusations, neglect, systemic mistreatment, against one of the most visible institutions on earth. You can't expect to say those things and not face scrutiny." Meghan's voice was tight now, laced with emotion. "So I'm supposed to be silent? Just accept mistreatment because calling it out makes people uncomfortable? That's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps these systems in place." Joy saw her opening. "No one's saying you should stay silent, but people are saying your story keeps shifting. First Harry was your protector, then he was part of the problem. First the royal family was warm, then they were complicit. Which version are we supposed to believe? There were no easy exits left. The facade of friendly daytime banter had long since been obliterated. What remained was a broadcast moment that would be dissected for weeks of brutal. Unscripted clash between media powerhouses and a woman used to controlling her own narrative. And for Meghan Markle, the story was no longer hers alone to tell. First, they welcomed you. Then, you say they were racist from day one. So which version should we believe? The question sliced through the studio air like a blade. Meghan's expression snapped from composed to fiery in an instant. "My story hasn't changed?" she shot back, her voice suddenly louder, sharper enough to make even the crew take notice. "What's changed is people's willingness to listen without bias. What you're doing now, it's exactly what the British media did, twisting my words, manufacturing contradictions where there are none." But the panel could smell blood. They'd hit a nerve, and they weren't letting go. Sunny leaned in, her tone ice cold but deliberate. "Let's talk about the British media. You've repeatedly claimed they treated you worse than Kate Middleton, but side-by-side coverage shows both of you faced extreme scrutiny. The difference, Kate never turned it into a public narrative of victimhood. The moment the name Kate Middleton entered the conversation, Meghan's demeanor shifted completely. Her polished professionalism dissolved into something raw and emotional victimhood. Meghan barked. "You think calling out racism and discrimination is playing victim? I came here for an adult conversation, not to be ambushed and gaslit on live TV." "No one is gaslighting you," Whoopi interjected firmly, voice like steel. We're asking the same questions millions of people want answers to. If your story holds, then defend it with facts, not emotion." And then Sarah stepped in for the kill. Here's the contradiction viewers can't ignore. You say you want privacy. You've claimed the press intruded on your life. But then, you sign multi-million-dollar media deals, give blockbuster interviews, launch documentaries. How do you reconcile demanding privacy while building a brand off publicity? Meghan's breathing was heavier now. The pressure was becoming visible, palpable. "I never said I wanted complete privacy," she responded, her voice tight. "I said I wanted fair treatment and control over my narrative, not to have it shaped by people with malicious intent." Joy pounced. "So everyone who questions your story is acting with malicious intent. Palace staff, journalists, even people here in the US who have legitimate concerns about your version of events. The trap had been perfectly set. If Meghan said yes, she'd sound paranoid and defensive. If she said no, she'd be admitting her critics had valid points. She took a third path. Outrage. "This is unbelievable," Meghan said, her voice cracking with fury. "I'm being treated like a hostile witness instead of a guest. You clearly made up your minds before I walked in. This isn't journalism, it's a character assassination masquerading as an interview." Whoopi didn't flinch. "Character assassination? No, we're holding you accountable for the things you said publicly. If asking for proof feels like an attack, maybe the issue isn't the questions, it's the answers." The room fell silent. Cameras captured every twitch, every flash of emotion crossing Meghan's face. She was realizing it in real time. This wasn't a conversation. It was an expertly coordinated takedown. Her narrative exposed its inconsistencies and forced her into a corner where every answer made her look worse. But they weren't done yet. And then came the moment that would echo across headlines, reaction videos, and think pieces for months. Joy leaned forward and delivered the final blow. "Meghan, let's address something that's been bothering a lot of people. You've presented yourself as a champion for women's rights and equality. But there are multiple accusations from female staff members at Kensington Palace, accusations of bullying. How do you square that with your feminist image?" It was a direct hit. Meghan's face flashed from shock to indignation, then something close to panic. Her carefully constructed facade didn't just crack, it shattered. "That is absolutely outrageous," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "Those allegations were investigated and found to be," and just like that, the interview descended into chaos. Meghan had walked onto The View expecting tough questions. But what she got was a masterclass in journalistic cross-examination. And by the end, she wasn't just fighting for her reputations, she was fighting to stay in control of her own story. It was the kind of television moment that doesn't just make headlines, it becomes one. Actually, they weren't. "Sonny," Hostin cut in, her voice sharp with surgical precision. "The results of that investigation were never made public. The palace said the matter was handled internally. That's not the same as being cleared, is it?" Meghan's hands trembled. Slightly in her lap, the mask of composure cracking. "I cannot believe you're bringing up gossip as if it's fact," she said, her voice tight, on the verge of unraveling. "This is exactly the treatment I've spoken out against. No man would be subjected to this level of character assassination over anonymous smears." But Sarah wasn't about to let her off the hook. "They weren't anonymous," she replied, calm and lethal. "We have names. We have events. Jason Knopf, your own communications secretary, filed an official complaint. Melissa Tubati, your personal assistant, left citing emotional stress. These aren't nameless trolls, they're professionals who risked their careers to speak out." That landed like a gut punch. Meghan's face went pale. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for an emergency exit. For the first time, the Duchess looked truly cornered. "This is unconscionable," she whispered, almost inaudibly. "You're ambushing me with one-sided hit pieces and calling it journalism." Then Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, her voice laced with veteran authority. "Meghan, let's be honest. You've built your entire post-royal identity around being a victim of an unfair system. But what if you weren't just a victim? What if you were also part of the problem? What if you couldn't handle the pressure and, when things didn't go your way, you lashed out at the people around you and blamed the system to avoid responsibility? The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Meghan's eyes blazed. Her polished persona was gone. "How dare you!" she spat, her voice low and venomous. "How dare you sit there and psychoanalyze me based on palace talking points and British tabloid garbage? You don't know me. You don't know what I endured." Joy Behar didn't blink. "Then tell us," she challenged. "Don't deflect. Explain. Why did multiple women come forward with similar stories about your behavior? Make us understand." But Meghan was past explanation. Emotion had fully overtaken her. "I don't owe you an explanation for lies and slander," she snapped. "I don't have to sit here and be interrogated by people who've already decided I'm guilty." The hosts exchanged quick glances. They knew they had broken her. And the cameras were capturing every moment. Then came the final blow, this time from Sunny. "You talk about truth and accountability, Meghan. So here's your chance. Be accountable. Admit you played a role in how all this went wrong. That's what real leadership looks like." It was the last straw. Meghan's eyes lit with fury as she leaned forward, glaring at the panel. "I will not be lectured on accountability by a table of women who've made careers tearing other women down," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "This interview was a setup. You invited me here under false pretenses just to ambush and humiliate me." "Nobody's humiliating you," Whoopi replied, calm and cool. "We're asking you to defend public claims. If you can't handle scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be making those claims in the first place." That was it. Meghan stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the studio floor. "I'm done with this," she said, loud enough for the entire audience to hear. "I came here in good faith, and instead I've been subjected to a coordinated attack meant to destroy my character." As she removed her microphone, her hands visibly shaking, she turned to the camera with one final blast. "To everyone watching, this is what happens when you speak truth to power. This is what happens when you challenge oppressive systems. They don't argue with facts, they come after you personally." With that, she turned and walked off the set, leaving the studio in stunned silence. Her mic lay abandoned on the floor. As the cameras followed her retreat, Whoopi was the first to speak, her tone measured despite the chaos. "Well, that was certainly unexpected," she said, facing the camera with practiced professionalism. "When we come back, we'll break down what just happened and we want to hear your thoughts." As the show cut to commercial, the tension in the studio remained electric. Producers scrambled behind the scenes. The audience sat frozen. The hosts exchanged stunned looks. They had just made television history. Clips of Meghan's explosive exit were already being posted and shared, dissected by pundits and fans across every corner of social media. This wasn't just a dramatic walkout. This was a full-blown meltdown, witnessed live by millions. The View had lived up to its reputation for tough questions, but they had also ignited a cultural firestorm. This was more than an interview. It was a defining moment for Meghan Markle, and for anyone who thought they could walk into The View without being ready for war.